This is the fifth part of the interpretation of same as ever. Why are people so different? Let's continue. Recently, there's been a trending internet phrase, question, understand, become. It sounds sophisticated. For instance, you notice that elders in your social circle often share videos from a certain teacher, spreading positive vibes and sometimes suggesting you learn from them. At first, it seems reasonable, but after a while, the teacher's ideas sound increasingly absurd, claiming things like Aristotle might not exist, and Western civilization is a copy of China. During a family gathering, you argue with your uncle. You say the teacher's ideas are wrong, and of course, Aristotle exists. Still, your uncle refuses to listen and gets angry with you. Eventually, you realize it's not the teacher changing your uncle, it's your uncle needing the teacher. The teacher speaks pleasing words to evoke emotional value. Later, you come to understand. Your uncle, being older and not in the best health, why bother arguing with him? So, you start praising the teacher in front of him, even sharing the teacher's new videos. You go to the extent of promoting the teacher's philosophy, saying not only might Aristotle not exist, but the existence of ancient Greek civilization is also uncertain. Inadvertently, you become the most welcomed young person among the elders. This journey of yours is called, question him, understand him, become him. It's a compromise with reality, but it's also deeply resigned and absurd. You know what's right, but others seem to never accept it. If human nature is the same, why such vast differences among people? I believe the greatest difference lies in values, and values stem from worldviews. Where do worldviews come from? We've talked about the influence of family before, and this book by Housel emphasizes the impact of unique life experiences. People who lived through World War II, later in life, had a 3% higher chance of developing diabetes and a 6% higher chance of experiencing depression compared to those who didn't go through the war. Memories of hunger and hardship made them more inclined to hold on to food and be less optimistic about the world. They were less likely to marry and had lower satisfaction with their old age. They lacked trust and happiness. Material impacts of war are easily healed. In 1946, Japan didn't produce enough food to feed its people, yet by 1960, it was one of the most economically vibrant nations globally. Just 14 years, equivalent to 2009 to today. Cities rebuilt from ruins, markets recovered, businesses returned, everything changed, wounds healed. But the human heart leaves permanent scars. Do you think the future is optimistic or pessimistic? Do you believe the world is fundamentally good or bad? People with different experiences have radically different views. The commonality of human nature suggests seeds of various tendencies in everyone, as Mencius says, all have different, virtuous inclinations. But we must realize that some special experiences can suppress the growth of certain seeds. In the 1950s, scholars surveyed those who lived through the Great Depression and found distinctive psychological traits in that generation compared to the younger one. Faced with ambition and security, they chose security firmly. They scoffed at any success studies, and preferred to talk about topics like unemployment insurance and retirement plans. Painful experiences taught them to crave security. And you should know, the 1950s were a period of robust economic growth in the United States, with historically low unemployment rates. Those people turned a blind eye to opportunities. This is a scar. Hardships change perspectives, values, desires, and goals. Sapolsky's book Behave delves deeper into these principles, especially how childhood experiences have a lifelong impact. So, when people argue, it's not about debating a math problem. Logic of right or wrong is irrelevant, rather, it's a collision of life experiences. Only those who are proactive and lifelong learners can break free from the shackles of experience. They are an absolute minority. So, there's a saying, do not advise kindness without experiencing others' struggles. Of course, this is not entirely accurate, everyone should strive to be kind. But the truth is, people often underestimate differences in perspectives. The saying continues, if you undergo their hardships, it doesn't guarantee greater kindness than theirs. Let's be more tolerant. Now, should we passively accept differences among people and everyone becomes like the teacher? No, not necessarily. In the grand scheme, we remain hopeful and optimistic about human nature, but facing each specific case, you should have a sense of pessimism. And you should be fully prepared for the evil in human nature. There's a saying, everything is sales. Regardless of your role in a company, your ultimate job is to aid in sales. This is a new societal norm shaped by the free market. We profit by providing good things to others. Just compare historical figures who didn't need to sell, those who unscrupulously took others' belongings through violence or privilege, what kind of people they were. You'll understand that this spirit of sales is, in fact, a virtue. But everything being sales means the image presented by others is often not true or at least not comprehensive. Flaws and failures aren't conducive to sales, so you don't see others' pain, fear, and insecurity. This means facing people with seemingly bright images, you underestimate yourself. You think you lack some crucial qualities they possess. It also means you overestimate them. You believe their success is solely due to their high personal qualities. But we've discussed the 7 rules of power. Reality is not fair. Many people, to gain power, will not hesitate to do evil. And it's not just power, any good thing, economists call it, incentives, can attract people to do wrong. Values may come not only from experiences but also from incentives. Housel says incentives are the most powerful force in the world. Given enough incentive, over 50% of people in the world would be willing to do anything crazy. Around 2005, the U.S. banking industry popularized subprime mortgages. People with moderate incomes and poor credit records were still granted loans to buy houses. These loans had tricks, like adjustable interest rates that started low but could sharply increase later, making it impossible for borrowers to repay. Even if borrowers defaulted, banks might not suffer losses because they already packaged those loans into financial products sold to other institutions. As long as property values rose, institutions wouldn't incur losses, they could always reclaim the houses. But this play was inevitably unsustainable. In reality, these subprime loans triggered the 2008 financial crisis. Back then, people knew subprime loans were a shady business, not the path to wealth. So why did people still do it? Housel knows someone who worked with subprime loans, selling loans to people with no repayment capacity. He was well aware it was an illegitimate business, but he still did it. Why? Because his original job was delivering pizzas. In one day, his income from subprime loans exceeded what he earned delivering pizzas in a month. Would he not do it? That's the power of incentive. There's a Mexican drug lord, ruthless and harmful to many. Yet, in a village in Mexico, Housel doesn't say, but I guess it's probably the drug lord's hometown, everyone in the village admires him, willing to protect him at any cost. Why? Because the village is exceptionally poor, and the drug lord provides livelihood. When a family in the village is getting married, the drug lord says, "The wedding's on me. I'll arrange food, drinks, and a band, so the entire village can join your wedding." The drug lord understands incentives. By being a good person in his hometown, he ensures good people willingly protect him. Some seemingly irrational things make sense when you think about incentives. Once, a CNBC host was questioned, "Your content seems problematic. Many reports lack value, sometimes even contradicting yourselves." The host didn't say whether the criticism was valid. Instead, he responded, "We have 17 hours of live TV broadcasts every day. Logically, you should have more to say when there's important news, and if there's no significant news, you shouldn't report it. But as a TV station, you must fill that much airtime." People are compelled by incentives. Jason Zweig, a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, has a theory: professional writers have 3 survival strategies. First, lie to those who want to be deceived, and you'll get rich. Second, tell the truth to those who want to know the truth, and you'll make a living. Third, tell the truth to those who want to be deceived, and you'll go bankrupt. Considering Zweig himself, Housel relaying his theory, and me relaying Housel's relay, 3 columnists, there's a certain irony. As you can imagine, we're just making a living. So, you ask, can those who like to be deceived awaken? Awakening is not easy, but people indeed undergo extreme changes in extreme situations, just not necessarily in a positive direction. In the 1920s, low taxes were the economic ideology for all Americans. No politician dared to propose tax increases. However, after the Great Depression and World War II, under great pressure, people's sentiments changed, and the U.S. drastically raised tax rates. In 1943, Roosevelt raised the tax rate for income over $400,000 to an unimaginable 94%, meaning at this point, almost anything you do is like working for the government. People accepted it, and Roosevelt was re-elected president with a landslide the following year. This continued until the 1960s. Americans had immense trust in the government. Then came the high inflation and unemployment rates of the 1970s, and the government's prestige sharply declined. Reagan said the U.S. government was the root of America's problems, and people chose him as their president. So, columnists don't change people's views, experiences do. Of course, there are negative changes too, like Germany being a democratic country with people fond of philosophical thinking, yet they elected Hitler. Why? Because in 1923, Germany experienced unimaginable hyperinflation. A recent major news is that Argentina elected a president, Milei, with extremely radical ideas, claiming to be a madman. He once advocated using Bitcoin as legal tender and announced plans to abolish the central bank. Why? Because of hyperinflation. We don't know what policies this new president will implement, but the lesson is, even though hardships can change people, don't wish for hardships, as they might lead to particularly undesirable changes. But if you're already deep in hardship, there's no need to despair. Many people change for the better. The 1930s in the U.S. weren't just about the Great Depression, it was also the fastest decade of productivity and technological progress in American history. The number of cars, miles of roads, electrification in cities and rural areas, all surged forward. Electricity finally became a necessity. Americans invented new business models like supermarkets and self-service laundromats and many new machines. High school education became widespread. Firstly, destruction precedes creation, old companies go bankrupt, and new ones naturally emerge to explore new methods. But more importantly, people are forced to think of new ways. Pressure focuses your attention, eliminates procrastination and indecisiveness, and forces you to get things done. This is why breakthrough technologies often come from military support. The military must solve new and real problems. Taleb says, the excess energy released by the overreaction to setbacks is the source of innovation. Hardship may not necessarily train people, but it's likely to change people, just not necessarily in a positive direction. Columnists are just talk. Life is the best teacher.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.